There's a bottle of sunscreen in almost every bathroom, and yet somehow, it's one of the least consistently used products in it. Bought with good intentions, worn a handful of times each summer, and quietly forgotten the rest of the year. Nobody decides out loud to skip it. It just happens, day after day, until years have gone by. The strange part is that the damage from those skipped days doesn't show up right away. It shows up 2 decades later, in the mirror, and by then it looks like it came out of nowhere. If you're somewhere between 40 and 70, you've probably noticed changes in your skin that feel sudden, even though they weren't. Spots that weren't there before, texture that feels rougher in places, a kind of unevenness that no amount of good sleep or good food seems to fully smooth out. It's tempting to think of this as simply what happens with age, full stop, and leave it there. But a meaningful portion of what we call aging skin isn't really about age at all. It's about accumulated sun exposure, tallied up over decades. One skipped or half-applied sunscreen day at a time. This video isn't about telling you that Japanese women have flawless skin or some genetic advantage the rest of the world doesn't share. It's about a habit that's simply treated differently there, one that's worth understanding because it's fully within anyone's reach, regardless of where you live or what your skin looks like today. Let's start with the idea that gets this whole conversation off on the wrong foot in the first place. The idea that sunscreen is something you wear at the beach. In much of Japan, sun protection isn't treated as a summer accessory. It's closer to brushing your teeth, something built into the daily routine, applied every morning, rain or shine, starting in many cases from adolescence rather than middle age. That distinction matters enormously because sun damage isn't the result of one dramatic afternoon at the beach without protection. It's the result of thousands of small, unprotected exposures over the years. The walk to the car, the errand that took 15 minutes longer than expected, the afternoon spent near a sunny window at the office. None of these moments feel significant on their own. Over 20 or 30 years, they add up to a great deal. Picture a woman named Naomi, now in her late 50s, who started wearing a light facial sunscreen every morning at 19, simply because that's what was normal in the household she grew up in. She never thought of it as a beauty routine or an anti-aging strategy. It was just part of getting dressed, the same as putting on deodorant. 4 decades later, without ever having done anything dramatic or expensive, her skin carries noticeably less visible sun damage than many people who spent those same decades reaching for sunscreen only a few times a year. The difference isn't a secret ingredient. It's 4 decades of an ordinary morning habit. I've written a guide that compiles the daily habits Japanese women have followed for generations to age more slowly, stay active, and maintain healthy skin and a strong body well into their 80s. It's called Still Young in Japan, and I'd love to help you do the same. Right now, the guide is 98 pages long, but everyone who purchases it this month will receive all new chapters added over the next few weeks completely free of charge. Scan the QR code or click the link below to get your copy and start aging on your own terms today. The first point worth understanding here is what daily, cumulative sun exposure actually does over time. Ultraviolet light breaks down collagen and elastin in the skin gradually, and it also triggers the kind of pigment changes that eventually show up as spots and uneven tone. This process, often called photoaging, is now understood to be responsible for a very large share of what we associate with visibly aged skin, arguably more than the passage of time itself. This isn't meant to frighten anyone or suggest damage already done is somehow permanent and hopeless. It's meant to shift where the emphasis belongs, from expensive treatments aimed at reversing damage to a much simpler habit aimed at preventing more of it going forward. The second point is about reapplication, which is where a lot of well-meaning routines quietly fall apart. Applying sunscreen once in the morning and assuming it lasts through an entire day of errands, driving, and time outdoors is one of the most common and understandable mistakes people make. Most sunscreens are formulated to remain effective for roughly 2 hours of active exposure, sometimes less with sweating or contact with water or fabric. A habit worth building, regardless of where you live, is keeping a small tube of sunscreen somewhere easily accessible, in a bag or at a desk, and reapplying it during the parts of the day when you're actually out in daylight, rather than treating the morning application as a single, permanent shield. The third point is about texture and formulation, because this is genuinely where a lot of people give up on the habit altogether. If a sunscreen feels heavy, greasy, or leaves a noticeable white residue, most people will simply stop reaching for it, no matter how well they understand the reasoning behind it. This is part of why lightweight fluid or essence-like sunscreen formulations, widely available and popular in Japanese skincare, tend to see much higher daily use than thicker, more traditional formulas. The lesson here isn't that you need to buy a specific brand from a specific country. It's that if your current sunscreen feels unpleasant to wear, that discomfort is very likely the real reason you're skipping it, and it's worth trying a different texture, rather than assuming the problem is a lack of willpower. The fourth point moves beyond what you put on your skin and into what you put between your skin and the sun. In much of Japan, it's common to see women carrying a parasol on sunny days, even for short walks, along with wide-brimmed hats and lightweight long sleeves during the warmer months. This isn't treated as excessive or overly cautious. It's simply a second, physical layer of protection that works alongside sunscreen rather than instead of it. You don't need a specific parasol to benefit from this idea. A wide-brimmed hat kept by the door, sunglasses that actually cover the delicate skin around the eyes, or choosing the shaded side of the street when you have the option all serve the same basic purpose, and they require no daily willpower at all once they become part of how you leave the house. The fifth point is one that deserves honesty rather than exaggeration. None of this undoes damage that's already there, and no habit, however consistent, guarantees a specific outcome for your particular skin. Genetics, skin type, past sun exposure, and overall health all play a role, and if you have specific concerns about skin changes, unusual spots, or anything that looks different from the rest of your skin, that's always worth having checked by a dermatologist rather than assumed to simply be sun damage. What a daily sun protection habit can reasonably do, according to general dermatological understanding, is help reduce the pace of further damage from this point forward, which matters just as much at 50 or 60 as it does at 20. There's also a mental shift worth naming, because so much of the frustration people feel about their skin later in life comes from thinking there's nothing to be done except manage decline. That framing misses something important. A woman who starts a consistent, comfortable sun protection habit at 50 isn't undoing the past. She's simply changing what the next 20 years will look like in a way that's entirely within her control without needing anyone else's cooperation or any dramatic lifestyle change. It's worth addressing a common misconception directly because it quietly stops a lot of people from bothering at all. The belief that sun damage is only a concern on clear, sunny days or only during summer. Ultraviolet rays pass through cloud cover, and a meaningful portion of daily UV exposure happens on overcast days when nobody feels the need to reach for sunscreen. Many people also underestimate the exposure that happens through car windows and office windows. Since UVA rays, the type most associated with long-term skin aging rather than sunburn, pass through ordinary glass fairly easily. This is part of why a habit built around routine rather than weather forecasting tends to work so much better over the long run. If sunscreen only comes out when the sky looks a certain way, it's competing against your own judgment about the weather, which is a much less reliable trigger than simply doing it every morning as part of getting ready for the day. There's a practical way to think about building this into a morning that's already full and doesn't have room for one more decision to make. Keeping sunscreen next to something you already use every single day, a toothbrush, a favorite moisturizer, a hairbrush, tends to work far better than treating it as a separate step to remember on its own. The habit attaches itself to something already automatic rather than competing for willpower each morning. Small details like this rarely get mentioned, but they're often the actual difference between a habit that lasts 20 years and one that quietly disappears after a few weeks. None of this is about presenting Japan as having solved something the rest of the world missed, or suggesting every woman there follows this habit perfectly. Plenty of people everywhere, including in Japan, skip sunscreen more often than they'd like to admit. What's genuinely useful here isn't the country of origin. It's the underlying principle, treating sun protection as a daily, year-round habit rather than an occasional summer task. Choosing a texture you'll actually want to wear every day, keeping something on hand to reapply, and adding simple physical protection like a hat or shade whenever it's convenient. If there's one thing worth taking away from all of this, it's that the sunscreen sitting half-used in your bathroom cabinet isn't a failure of discipline. It's usually a sign that the habit hasn't been made easy or pleasant enough yet to stick. That's a solvable problem, and solving it today is worth more than any amount of worry about the spots and texture changes that already happened years ago. Healthy aging was never really about undoing the past. It's about the quiet, unremarkable choices made consistently from here forward, the kind that don't ask for much, and that your skin, 20 years from now, will very likely thank you for. If you take one thing from this, let it be permission to stop thinking of sunscreen as something you either remembered or forgot, a small daily failure or success. Think of it instead as a habit still being built, one that gets easier the moment it's attached to something you already do without thinking. 20 years is a long time. Most of it hasn't happened yet, and what happens to your skin during it is still, in large part, up to the mornings you haven't lived through yet.